Good morning. Um, let's get started. Today's daf is Yevamot Daf Ayin Bet, and we've been discussing circumcision in connection with the eating of truma, specifically the fact that if one has not been circumcised, then one is not able to eat truma. We mentioned yesterday that there are two parts to the circumcision process: the actual cutting of the foreskin, the milah, and the uncovering of the head of the male member, the priya. We noted that the priya discussion follows from God telling Yoshua to prepare knives to circumcise Israel again. The reference to again suggests that the knives were not for the cutting, but for the uncovering. That was how the Gemara understood it, and so that was the basis for understanding this separate concept of priya, separate from milah. In passing, we noted that Yoshua in Parakeh, Pasuk tells us that Bnei Yisrael, when they left Egypt, they were circumcised, but those who were born in the wilderness were not. And so in the middle of the second to last line of Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Bet, the Gemara is going to attempt to understand why not. So again, we're in the second to last line. Uva Midbar. Uva Midbar, my time alo. Why didn't they get circumcised in the my time alo mal? Why didn't they get circumcised while they were in the wilderness? So two potential answers. One answer is, if you want, you could say that because of the weakness associated with the journey. So as a result, so that's why they were too weak to survive circumcision, and so as a result, they were not circumcised in the wilderness. And now we turn to Ayin Bet Amud Aleph, or you could say Mishum de lo nashiv lahu ruach tzfonis, that there was no northern wind blowing for them. Titania kol osan arba'in shana shah Yisrael b'midbar lo nashv lahem ruach tzfonis, that for the entire 40 years that Bnei Yisrael were in the wilderness, so the northern wind didn't blow for them, and that northern wind, Rashi says, is ruach tzfonis, nocha lo chama v'lo tzoninus, that it's a nice wind. It's not too hot, not too cold. V'chama zorachas, and it causes the sun to be able to shine. So as a result, that is why. So without that ruach tzfonis, without that nice weather, that is why it was not a good time to do milah. So my time, why didn't the north wind blow during the time that they were in the wilderness? So so you could say that it was because they were being rebuked, and as Rashi says, mishum nezufin hayu mimaza ha'egel, that they had done the egel zahav, they had done the golden calf, the lo hayirui and or noga, and so they weren't fit. It wasn't appropriate for them to get a good light. So so that's explanation number one. Or you could say that in fact, Delon Nibadur Anne Chavod, that God didn't want the wind to blow, because that would cause the clouds of glory to disperse. And so, of course, it then doesn't answer the question, well, why not just have the clouds of glory be able to withstand the north wind? But maybe they weren't, they didn't merit that level of miracle. In any event, so those are the two possible explanations for why there was no north wind. So Amar of Papa Hilkach Yoma de Eva Yoma de Shusa Loma Linan Bay. So as a result, based on what we've just shown, that if it's a cloudy day or a day with winds, particularly not winds from the north but from the south, so then you don't you don't need to, you would not necessarily circumcise on it. And we don't do bloodletting on those days. However, nowadays, the dashuba rabim, that we in fact have engaged in that kind of behavior, that we do in fact do a bris milah on days when it's cloudy or windy. So that's because Shomer Pistoyim Hashem, that the pasuk in Tehillim says that the Hashem protects the simple, and so as a result, that's the basis. Now I will note, I said that Rashi gave the explanation of because of Maisa Egel. Tosfos disagrees. Tosfos in Nezuvim Hayu says it was not the Maisa Egel. So Amar Rabbeinu Yitzchak mi Maisa Miraglim, v'lo Kamosha Pirish Bekuntras mi Maisa Egel shaharei Machal lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'Amar lahem Salachti she'achar kach na'aseh mishkan v'hashra shchinaso b'neihem. So it doesn't make sense that it would be the Egel HaZahav, because the Egel HaZahav was in fact, God forgave the Jewish people. And so as a result, that is why Tosfos suggests that instead it is the spies, the story of the spies. Now I will note that maybe that Rashi focuses on the story of the Egel HaZahav, because what did we say? We said that Kol Oton Arba'in Shana, that all 40 years. So as a result, if in fact it was 40 years, it can't be the spy story, because the spy story didn't happen until the second year of the Exodus. So that would not explain why there wasn't any north wind for the first year. So in any event, the bottom line is that we have that dispute between Tosfos and Rashi on that front. Now, earlier we can go back actually to an earlier Tosfos and just note the fact that that although we just said that they did not do Mila, the Tosfos cites the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. If we take a look at the second last Tosfos on Ayin Aleph on Bet, my time lo mo, mashma de lo mo klal, right? The implication is that there was no Mila at all. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, but in the Midrashim that Rabbi Eliezer put together, mashma shemalu, to come or mimana afar Yaakov, that ra kol hamidbar shahaya mali me'or loseyan shal Yisrael, that when Bilam says in Bamidbar Parakaf Gimel Pasuk Yud, who's counted the dust of Yaakov, it's a reference to all the foreskins of the Jewish people that were in the wilderness. Moreover, Megillah Sisarim, the Rabbeinu Nisim, if you take a look at the Megillah Sisarim that Rabbeinu Nisim put together, this is a pamphlet that of different ideas that Rabbeinu Nisim in the 11th century had gathered, and included in that are some midrashim as well. So there he says, Nami mashma shemalo v'lo paro, that actually what happened is that they did Mila, but they didn't do Priya. Because of Bahu Kol Osan Arbaim Shana, Shaha Yisrael B'Midbar Lo Hayaporin B'Bnei Inoi Haderech, that the difficulties of the traveling made it so that they could not do Priya, but they were able to do Mila. And indeed, that could be the answer, that in fact, that when we say Lo Moel, we don't mean Lo Moel at all. We mean that they didn't do the full Mila of Mila plus Priya, but rather they just did Mila. So that's Tosfos number one. And we continue on with the next Tosfos. So if in fact they didn't do Mila, so V'im Tomer V'eich Hayu Ochlin Kachim, if they didn't do Mila, how were they able to eat Kachim? Or Filu Basar Klal, or any kind of meat whatsoever? Kevin Shalom Malu, Shalom Huter Lahem Basar Taiba. They were not allowed to just eat meat that they just desired. Ella al Yadei Shlamim. They only were able to eat meat through bringing a carbon shlamim. V'aral Asur l'kachim, and an uncircumcised person is prohibited to eat kachim. And even if you say, as we said a few moments ago, that they did mila but they didn't do priya, kamosha mashma bepirkei de Rabbi Eliezer Megillas Sasarim, mikom makom kevan den itzdavu ala priya, below paru ki'ilu lo malu. Right? It's as if they didn't do mila at all. The ilav hachi heich medakdek the aro mekabel hazah mi'avosenu. So now Tosos answers, V'yesh lomer the Yotzi Mitzrayim malu uparu, that the people who left from Egypt, then they had already done mila with priya, v'osam achlu kachim, and they were therefore able to eat the kachim. Aval hayeludim b'midbar, those who were born in the midbar, shalom malu, that did not do mila, lo achlu kachim, they were not able to eat the kachim. But it must be that they were allowed to eat the meat that they desired. That it could not have been prohibited to them once they were not allowed to eat kachim. And it may be that in fact it was just deer and rams, things that did not get brought as a offering as a korban, and those were things that were allowed to be shechted even in the time of the Jewish people traveling in the wilderness. So that is another toast. Finally, we'll do the top tosos on Ayin Bet Amud Aleph. Shum de lo nashiv lehu ruach bonus. So B'Sifri Omer de Begenusan Shal Yisrael Sibur Akasav Shalo Asu Ela Pesach Echad. Right. So in the Sifri it says that they only did the korban Pesach once. B'Mem Shana, in all of the 40 years. Shahayu b'Midbar, that they were in the wilderness. Shalom Matzinu Sha'asu Pesach Ela B'Shana Shniya. They only did it 1 year later in the beginning of the second year. V'tema, now it's a wonder. Could they have intentionally refused to do it? And the imishum milas charim, and if you say that they didn't do it because they didn't have mila, because obviously that you need to have mila in order to bring the korban. V'chashiv ganus, and it lefisha garmu haim davarza, and it was considered a negative quality because the fact that they couldn't bring the because they didn't do mila, they weren't able to bring the korban. But one second, we saw yesterday that when it's not possible to do mila, when we're talking about not oneself or potentially even oneself, but definitely when we're talking about one's children, lo haisama keves, it doesn't it doesn't actually prevent us from offering the korban pesach. Kedamar leil, as we said on Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, hamol lo amar rachmana, that you should they should be circumcised, va'az yikrav, and then you should bring. Amar Rabbeinu Yitzchak, meaning that, and as a result, if it's not possible to do the milah, then you're okay bringing the korban, even though ideally you should have milah. So Rabbeinu Yitzchak suggests that in fact they did offer a korban pesach throughout the time that they were in the wilderness, but they only offered the Pesach the way it should be offered just once. And so that's why it was a gunus for them, because it wasn't the proper way to offer it. Okay, so now I will note that the Ramban disagrees with this Tosos and says that in fact it was only offered once and it was not offered the rest of the time. So then why wasn't it offered if that's true? So a couple of possible answers. So the Shara Melech suggests that if also unable to, that if if you're that although b'di'evet you could offer the sacrifice, if you're not going to be able to have performed the milah by the time that it's time to come to eat the sacrifice, eat the korban pesach, well then also you're not, then it's a different story and you're not able to offer it. Alternatively, I wonder whether maybe you could say that when somebody else is slaughtering the animal for you, that they have to be themselves eligible, meaning all of his sons and slaves have to have had milah, and maybe there were no such people that didn't have any children that weren't that were all circumcised. Or you can say that that really undermining the basics of the question, which is that in fact they did. That was the problem. They could have offered it, but they didn't. So anyway, those are a couple of different answers to this question, and we can say that in fact, as the Ramban said, that they were only offered the korban pesach the first 1 year in on the first anniversary of their exodus. Okay, so now since we mentioned something about the north wind, we go back into the Gemara, and we're at the 2 dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. So Tana Rabbanan, Kol Ha'usan Arbayim Shana Shahayu Yisrael B'Midbar Lo Hayu Yom Shalom Nishba Bo Ruach Tzifonis B'Chatzi Alayla. So although we said a few moments ago that the north wind never blew while they were in the wilderness, now we have another brisa that actually says that it did blow, but it was just blown at midnight. So my Talmuda, what is this verse teaching us? I'm sorry, Shneimar, Vahi b'chatzi alayla, v'Hashem hikacho b'chor. That when it comes to the destruction of the Egyptians, the killing of the firstborns, it happened at that moment of midnight. So my Talmuda, what is that pasuk coming to teach us? It's coming to teach us Kamash Malan the Eis Ratzon Milsahi. That is the concept of a good time is a real thing, and that midnight is a particular good time for the Jewish people. And so as a result, that was what they and so as a result, even though we had said earlier that the north wind did not blow at all, it actually blew at midnight. Okay, next, now the Gemara is going to turn to discuss one who pulls on the skin in order to recreate a foreskin. That's called a mashuch. After one has already been circumcised. So let's see. So Amar Rav Huna Dvar Torah mashuch ochel b'truma. That from that according to the Torah, a mashuch, if you pull on one's foreskin to recreate essentially a foreskin that had after having done milah, so that person is really allowed to eat truma. But But the rabbi said, no, you shouldn't eat truma because he looks like he's uncircumcised. So Meisvei. So now we're going to challenge this concept, and in the end, we're going to have two efforts to challenge it, and finally, we're going to show that in fact Rav Huna's statement is rejected. So Meisvei, Mashach Tzarach Sheyimol. Was it? We have a brisa that says that a mashach needs to be circumcised. So doesn't that suggest that in fact it's a biblical requirement? No, midrabanan. No, it's only a rabbinic requirement. My karile. Now, 1 second. That was sort of like an obvious response. So what was the person thinking when he asked this question? Hatzarach tani. In fact, the word sarich suggests that it's rabbinic because it just sees that it's need. It's not chayiv. So katoy the sefer. No, the problem is that take a look at the end of that brisa that says that it's a mashach tzarach sheyimol. What does it say? Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yimol mimnei shesakana hilo. That in fact a mashach does not have do mila because it's dangerous for him. So Amrulo, they said to him, the rabbi said to him, V'alo harbe malu bimei ben kuziva. But second, there were lots of people in the days of Ben Kuziva, v'holidu banim uvanot, and they had lots of sons and daughters. Shneamar himol yimol, right? And it says, you shall circumcise, circumcise, you shall circumcise. Afilu me'apamim, implying that you could circumcise even 100 times. V'omer es brisi hefer. And with respect to the next pasuk in the it says my covenant he's violated. L'rabos as a mashach, so that comes to include the mashach. So the idea is, so my va'omer. So why does the Brisa say va'omer, and it says chitema hai himo yimol? So if you just have the fact that you should definitely be circumcised, the double language of circumcision, l'rabos tzitzun hama'akvim esamila. That could just be to tell us that if there are any strands of skin that still cover the head of the male member, so then that will be a problem, and you need to address them. So tashma as brisi hafer l'rabos as hamash. And then the Eis Brisi Hefer comes and tells us that it also includes not just where there are additional skins that are that prevent a valid circumcision biblically, but rather even if there's somebody does something and somebody pulls on their foreskin, so that actually to recreate that foreskin, that also will be covered by the obligation to do mila even several times. So hasavar midakanasiv la hashas kra. So since the Gemara has cited a verse, I would have thought doraisahi. I would have thought that it's biblical. So velohi, but in fact it is not. Midirabanan ukras machta ba'alma. So rather it is just a smachta ba'alma. It is just a biblical support, but in fact it is only a rabbinic requirement to circumcise somebody who pulls on the foreskin to recreate a foreskin. So meisvei. So now we're going to again attempt to challenge Rav Huna. Tumtum ein ochel betruma. We have a brisa that says that a tumtum is somebody who has a layer of skin covering their private parts, so it's difficult to tell whether the baby is a male or female. So nasha va'avadav ochlin. So if a tumtum has a wife or slaves, so then they are allowed to eat. The wife and slaves are allowed to eat truma, even though the tumtum itself is not able to eat truma. So harei elu ochlin. Sorry, mashuk v'nolad kishehu mahul. If somebody who pulls on their foreskin, the mashuk, and somebody who is born circumcised, so they harei elu ochlin. They're allowed to eat truma. Androgynous. And of course, that is going to be the piece that is challenging to Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said that rabbinically they're not allowed to eat truma. Androgynous ochel b'truma, somebody who has both male and female organs is allowed to eat truma. Ve'ein ochel b'kachim, but they're not allowed to eat kachim. Tumtum eino ochel lo b'truma v'lo b'kachim. And a tumtum cannot eat truma or kachim. So katani mias mashach v'nola kishehu mahol harei elu ochlin. So tiyufta de Rav Huna tiyufta. So in fact, the fact that we say that a mashach can eat truma, so that shows that it's a refutation of Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said that he cannot eat truma if rabbinically. Because of his mashach status, and yet this does not suggest that at all. So So that seems to be a refutation, and indeed the Gemara says that it is a refutation. So now the Gemara goes back to the statement to try and understand the brisa, because the brisa seems to have some inconsistency in it, because Amar Mar Tumtum Eino Ocha B'Truma. So we started by saying a Tumtum can't eat Truma. Nasha V'Avadav Okum, but his wife and slaves are allowed to. So 1 second, how could he be married? Nasha L'Tumtum Manalei. How does a Tumtum have a wife? We don't know whether he's a male or female. So Elaim and Kaddish, if you say that he just did Kedushin, Titania, Tumtum Shakidish, Kedusha of Kedushin, because we have a brisa that says that when a Tumtum does Kedushin, that is considered a valid Kedushin, this Kaddish, Kedusha of Kedushin. And if somebody does Kedushin to a Tumtum, meaning treats a Tumtum as a female, then that is also considered a Kedushin. So Amr de Amr L'Chumra, that's all talking about a Chumra. We're going to assume that we have to be worried that maybe either the Tumtum is male and successfully did Kedushin with a woman, or is female and somebody and a male did Kedushin with him. So that is all to be strict. But to be lenient in order to allow somebody to eat Truma, would we allow that? This Tumtum is possibly a woman. And a woman can't marry a woman. So Amar Abaye Kishabeitzav Nikaros Mibachutz. No, there are various categories of Tumtum. Meaning the Tumtum category involves some kind of covering that prevents a Mila from happening. And so it could be that even though the male organ is covered, it could be that there are testicles that are recognizable. And so we do know that the Tumtum is male. And so that could be the story that we're talking about. And so therefore, the Tumtum could have a wife. Rava says, no, don't have to say that. We could say that the reference to my Nashab, what does it mean? Women, his women. It doesn't mean his wife, but Emo, it means his mother. So Emo, his mother, Pshita. Of course, if let's say the mother is a Yisrael and she marries a Kohen and she has as a child a Tumtum, and now the Kohen dies, of course she can eat Truma. She has a descendant. So isn't that obvious? No, Ma'odatema Molid Machel, She'ain Molid Eino Machel. I might have thought that only offspring that has the possibility of having children can entitle the mother to eat Truma, but somebody like a Tumtum who has no male organ or female organ, so or at least not a visible one, so they are not able to have children, and so maybe they do not enable her to eat. Kamash Malan. So in fact, however, we say that the Gemara is telling us that in fact, or this Bryce is telling us that in fact she is able to eat based on that descendant. So now Tosos asks in Mibachutz, the last Tosos on Ayin Bedam Aleph, Be'im Tomer Akasi Heich Machel Es Ishto. How could this Tumtum enable his wife to eat? The Kavan de Ein Ben Bia, he has no ability to engage in marital relations. Lo Havi Chupa So Chupa, Kamo Pechusa Mibas Gimel. That just like you can't marry somebody who's under 3 years old, so too, because they're unable to engage in marital relations, so too you can't. This should not be a valid marriage because there's no possibility of marital relations. All right, so that since it's possible that we could tear that membrane and thereby reveal his male member, so that's as a result. So we say that so basically the royal likroa krua dummy, that anybody who is fit to be torn is as if it's already torn, And so as a result, we say that he is in fact fit for marital relations. Okay, so now Tashma. So now the Gemara is going to support Abaye and question Rava. Excuse me. Tumtum eno ochel lo betruma v'lo bekachim. At the end of that brisa, we said that a tumtum can't eat truma or kachim. So bishlam Abaye, it makes sense if we're talking about Abaye, Tana Resha Arel Vadai, Katani Seifa Safek Arel, that when we're talking about a tumtum in the beginning, we're talking about where we know that the tumtum is male, and so as a result, this person is definitely not circumcised. And at the end, when we reference a tumtum at the end, we're talking about Katani Seifa Safek Arel. We're talking about somebody who is possibly uncircumcised. So El Rava, but according to Rava, Tumtum the Seifa Lamali. Why does he need to repeat the law in connection with the end of the brisa? So Gemara explains, my tumtum arel, that when he was talking about a tumtum at the end, it really means just an arel, an uncircumcised person. So hush the suffix arel lo achil. 1 second. We already have a person who's uncircumcised, cannot eat. A vadai arel achil. So if you're talking about saying that the beginning was a suffix arel, and now we're talking about somebody who is a vadai arel, so then I don't understand. We in the beginning, if we say that a suffix arel can't eat, a vadai arel for sure can't eat. So ma tam ka'amar. So no, you're misunderstanding our point when we say that the end of the brisa is referring to a vadai arel, a regular uncircumcised person, because we're explaining matam tumtum eno ochel betruma. Why is it that a tumtum can't eat truma? Because he's a suffix arel. V'arel eno ochel lo betruma v'lo bekachim. Because an arel is not able to eat either truma or kachim. Okay, so now. Lema Ketanai, even though we've refuted Rav Huna, the Gemara now wonders whether there's actually a debate among Tanaim regarding Rav Huna's statement as to whether or not it is a biblical or rabbinic requirement to engage in that Mila. And so we're going to see whether maybe based on the Brisa. So again, Rashi explains, Nema Ketanai, Milsa de Rav Huna Tanaihi. This teaching of Rav Huna is a Tanai, is a Machlokas Tanaim. He having Moshe Raisa o de Rabbanan. Is the obligation to engage in Mila for a Mashach, a rabbinic obligation or a biblical obligation? So we're going to try and cite a Brisa that suggests that maybe in fact it is a Machlokas Tanaim, whether or not it's a biblical or rabbinic requirement. So Mashach, if you have somebody who has pulled on their foreskin to recreate it, the Gervin Shiniskaya Kishumo, or a convert who converted after having already been circumcised, the Katan Sha'avers Mano, Ushar Kol Hanimulim, or a child who is older than 8 days old, meaning after the time period, and any other situation where there's a requirement to be circumcised. And what does that come to include? It includes a double foreskin. So if in fact the person has a double layer of foreskin, so then each of them have to be cut. Although I will note that Rashi in Masechah Shabbos suggests that case involves somebody with actually a double member. But in any event, the bottom line is that that's possibly what it's talking about. So Eina Nimulin Elabiyom. So all of these people are only mal during the daytime. All right, Rabbi Elazar ben Bar Shimon Omer Bismano. It's if you do it on time, well then Eina Mulim Elabiyom. As we turn to Ayin Bet Amud Bet, then you are only going to do circumcision during the day. Shalom Bismano. nimulin beyom uvalayla. Then you can do the circumcision either during the day or at night. So what is this machlokus really about? About whether or not non-timely mila can be done at night. So Maila Bahakamiflgi. Isn't this the situation that they're arguing about? Demar Savar Mashach Doraisa, Umar Savar Mashach Derabana. That in fact, the first opinion says that the mashach is biblical, and that is why you have to do the Mila during the daytime. And the second opinion, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon's opinion, is that it's rabbinic, and that's why it doesn't have to be performed during the daytime. If we take a look in Tosos, Ein Nimul El Biyom, Hiksha Harav Ephraim, De Amai Itzrich Parakama de Kedushin, Oso below Osa. 1 second. If we're saying that this is all about a question of this obligation to do Mila is only during the daytime. Well, why did we need in Maseches Kedushin, which obviously we haven't yet gotten to in this cycle of Daf Yomi, but we will get to, God willing. Why do we need to have a teaching to specifically tell us that women are not the primary ones who are chayev in Mila? It says mitzvah aseh shazman grama, so that should be sufficient. So lo mechayev lemol espana tepuk leid dehavi mitzvah aseh shazman grama biyom below belayla to mahai taima patrina isha mitzitzis. Just the same reason women are not obligated in tzitzis. V'yesh lomer de la Rabbi Elazar b'Rebbi Shimon itzrich. No, it's according to Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, who says that the Mila can happen at day or night. V'ha denimol l'shmona lo chashes man grama keven shemishmona ve'elach kol she'asa zmanahu. And yes, it may be that on the 8th day it's only during the daytime, but since from that point on it could be all time, so that as a result, according to that view, that's one explanation. So that's one explanation. Others don't like this answer because we don't paskin like Rav Elazar Rabbi Shimon. So therefore, they, for example, the Ritva suggests that it's not actually about that this is not actually a time-bound mitzvah, as the commandment for the woman is not to do the Mila, but to set up the Mila. And setting up the Mila can be done during the day and at night. So on the other hand, the Turei Even suggests that the night is not the end of the time. So as a result, meaning when it comes to tzitzis, so if you put on your tzitzis today, so then you still have to put on your tzitzis tomorrow. It's a new mitzvah. Whereas with respect to Mila, it's a continuation of the same mitzvah. And so as a result, even though you can only do the mitzvah during the daytime and not at nighttime, it is an ongoing mitzvah, and it's an ongoing obligation that is only once. And effectively, as a result, it is not, in fact, the Zman Grama, because it's every day and it's only once. Unlike tzitzis, which is every day, each day independently. And so as a result, that is considered a mitzvah Zman Grama, but not, or tefillin would be the same thing, but not the Mila. Okay, so those are a couple other potential answers. So now the Tizbara, 1 second, could that explanation possibly be correct? Katan she'avers mano mi'ika laman da'amar derabanan. Is it because one of the other categories is a infant who's past the 8th day, and nobody says that passing the 8th day takes away the biblical obligation and makes it only a rabbinic obligation. Really, everybody says that a mashach is only a rabbinic obligation to do Mila. The katan she'avers mano deoraisa, and everybody agrees that katan that past its time is a biblical obligation. And what they're arguing about is the following: Masavar darshinan uvayom, that the Tanakama says we learn uvayom. The vav of ubayom tells us that every Mila needs to happen during the daytime. Umar Sabar Lo Darshin Uvayom. And Rabbi Elazar ben Rav Shimon says, no, we don't. We're not going to derive the obligation to do it during the daytime from Ubayom. And so as a result, he says that even once the 8th day is passed, you could do it even at night. Kihada Yosef Rabbi Yochanan B'Kadarish. So Rabbi Yochanan was sitting and teaching the following. No, Sarbismano, if you have a leftover korban, okay, after the time that a korban is allowed to eat, what gets left over is called nosar. So Eino Nisraf Elavayom. So nosar should only be burned during the daytime. Shelo Bismano, but however, if in fact it wasn't burned, so Nisraf Bein Bayom Uvein Balayla. Then it can be burned during the day or at night. One second, Rabbi Elazar responded to Rabbi Yochanan and saying, I don't think that's true. That when it comes to the 8th day in doing Mila, it only happens during the day time. How do I know that when it comes to the 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th day, that it also happens only in the daytime? And even according to the opinions that say we do not learn from the letter vav an extra vav, but here when it comes to nosar, vav vehei darish, we have a pasuk. The pasuk says, Vihanosar. This is in Vayikra Parak Zayin Pasuk Yud Zayin. Vihanosar Mivsar Hazavach Vayom Ashlishi Be'eshi Saref. Right, the left and the leftover. And so because we have the vav and the hay that aren't necessary, we could have just said nosar Bimsar Hazavach Vayom Ashlishi Be'eshi Saref. It could have just said that. The fact that it says vihanosar, so that shows that in fact all times that we burn, we're only going to burn it during the daytime. Ishtik, Rabbi Yochanan had nothing to respond. Basar denafak, after Rabbi Elazar left, Amarle Rabbi Yochanan l'Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, Ra'iti leven pedas sheyoshi b'dorish k'moshe b'mpi hagvura. Wow, this guy, the son of Pedas, namely Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas, it has sat, was sitting and teaching Torah like Moshe, as if it was from the mouth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Amarle Reish Lakish explained, Didehi? No. Was it his own? Masnisahi? No, it's a brisa. Heika Tanalei. And where is the brisa taught? The Torah's Kohanim. It's taught in Torah's Kohanim. So Nafik Tanya Vitlasa Yamei. So Rabbi Yochanan spent 3 days learning Torah's Kohanim, the Sabra B'Tlasa Yarche, and then he spent 3 months fully understanding it. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Elazar Arel Shehiza. So now we're going to. So yesterday we mentioned that someone who has not been circumcised, who sprinkles para aduma water, i.e. mechatas, is what we're going to call it, performs a valid sprinkling. So now the Gemara is going to note that someone uncircumcised is like a tvul yom, someone who has immersed during the day and is waiting for nightfall to become totally tahor. And both are prohibited to eat truma, but both may sprinkle the para aduma water. So let's take a look and we'll see it. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, Arol Shehiza, if you have somebody who's uncircumcised and is sprinkling the mechatas, asok shera, their sprinkling is valid. Midi dehava atvul yom, because he's something like he's like a tvul yom. Sha'af apisha aser b'truma, even though he's prohibited to have truma, kosher b'para, he's qualified for in connection with the para aduma. So mala tvul yom shekain mutter b'maaser. So, and 1 second, maybe there's a difference. A tvul yom is allowed to eat meiser sheni, but that's not true for an arel. So atu anan la'achila kamrinan. Well, 1 second, we're not talking about eating the para aduma. Anan l'negia kamrinan. we're talking about touching the para aduma. Ma tvul yom she'aser b'negia de truma, and a tvul yom is not allowed to touch truma mutter befara, but is allowed to touch and is nonetheless allowed to engage in the service of the para aduma. So arel shemutar b'negia, an uncircumcised person who is tahar, of course, is permitted to touch truma. Eno din shemutar befara, isn't he certainly allowed to engage in the paraduma? So Tanya Nami Hachi, and indeed we have a brisa that supports this idea. Aral shehiza hazah sok shera. If a uncircumcised person sprinkles, so that sprinkling is considered kosher. Umasahaya, and there was in fact a situation where that happened. The hikshiru chachamim hazato, and the chachamim said that sprinkling is fine. Now meisvei, we're going to challenge this. Tumtum shekidish. We have another brisa that says a tumtum that consecrated mechatas shekidusho puzzle. That consecration is not valid. Ooh, that's different. Again, tumtum is considered to be an arel. So that is somebody who is Mimnesha who's suffix arel. And the reason is because he is potentially uncircumcised. But arel puzzle the kaddish, and an arel is not allowed to engage in the consecration of mechatas. Androgynous shekidesh, and somebody who is has male and female organs, kiddushe kosher, then they are allowed to, because of course if they have a male organ, that their male organ would have been circumcised. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, av androgynous shekidesh kiddusha psulin. Rabbi Yehuda says no, even somebody with male and female organs is not allowed. Menesha suffix isha, because maybe he's female. The isha psula milakadesh, and a woman is not allowed to engage in that consecration. Katani mia arel v'suffix arel pasul milakadesh. So we see that an arel or a suffix arel is not allowed to engage in the consecration of the mechatas. So they're also not allowed to engage in the sprinkling. So Amar Rav Yosef. So we see that this disagrees with our earlier comment, which said that they were allowed to. So Hai Tana Deve Rabbi Akiva, the person who taught this brisa is a Tana from Rabbi Akiva's school. Because Rabbi Akiva treats an uncircumcised person like a tameh. The Tanya, Rabbi Akiva Omer, ish larabos ha'arel. That when it comes to saying who cannot eat truma, ish comes to tell us that not only is somebody who's a mitzora or a zav not able to eat truma, but so too is somebody who's an uncircumcised kohen is not able to eat truma. So Amarava, Hava Yesivna Kamei de Rav Yosef. So Rava says I was sitting in front of Rav Yosef when he told me this. V'kashali, but I had a problem. Lo lishtame tana v'lisnei ha'arel v'hatamei. The problem is Velema Rabbi Akivahi. The problem is that why didn't our brisa specifically say that an uncircumcised and a tameh person in one phrase? Why did it treat the arel separately? And because if we fact said arel and tameh together, well then we would know that it was Rabbi Akiva. So maybe in fact, and we would know that Rabbi Akiva says, and Rav Yosef is suggesting that Rabbi Akiva is saying that an arel is equal to tameh, meaning that they can actually cause tuma. But if given the fact, according to Rava, that we didn't specifically pair them together, maybe when Rabbi Akiva says that an arel is like a tameh, he doesn't mean that it's totally like a tameh. He just means that you can't eat truma. He doesn't mean that you would make something tameh. Below, well, one second. We do see elsewhere that there is a statement where they combine arel and tameh. V'hakatani ha'arel v'hatameh peturim min ha're'iyah. We have a brisa that says that an arel, somebody who's not circumcised, and somebody who is tameh, is patur from re'iyah. They don't have to appear before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Beis Hamikdash on the holidays. So doesn't that suggest? So now that we have such a statement, so it shows that Rabbi Akiva could actually think that in fact tuma, that somebody who is tameh and somebody who is uncircumcised are totally equivalent, and therefore when an uncircumcised person touches something, they actually make it tameh. So no. So Rava responds, actually, I can explain why that grouping is specifically over there. Hasa mishum demes, that over there, both the reason that the uncircumcised person and the tameh person are both mentioned is that it's not that the arel, that the uncircumcised person is considered like their tameh, but rather the uncircumcised person is considered disgusting, repugnant, and so as a result, that is why it's grouped together. And so the bottom line is we have a machlokas between Rav Yosef and Rava regarding Rabbi Akiva's view in the Brisa that the Gemara used to challenge the ability of someone who is uncircumcised to touch truma. Rav Yosef says that Rabbi Akiva fully equates an uncircumcised person and someone who is tameh, and so he will transfer tuma to truma, and therefore he's not allowed to touch, not even allowed to touch truma. While Rava says that Rabbi Akiva does not fully equate an uncircumcised person and someone who is tameh, and so he can't consecrate. So although he can't consecrate para aduma water, he would not actually transfer tuma to truma. So stay tuned tomorrow as we begin by revisiting the Baraisa regarding the tumtum to understand the debate between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda. Have a wonderful day and look forward to seeing you then.